about the book and movie deal that we have that allowed us this lavish book tour.
And then I think,
Yes, no,
we have some refreshments.
Some refreshments, yeah.
Thanks to Malvern.
Do any of you want to?
So you mentioned that you're giving a reading as AWP. The schedule is full of amazing and wonderful things. When exactly is your reading?
Our panel is, it's a panel, which is a discussion and reading, and it's on Friday at 1:45 to 3 o'clock. Event F226.
Called Dual Citizens, Scientists, Poets.
So we'll be reading with 3 other poets who are a neuroscientist, a physiologist, and a software engineer from Canada, from the US, with really varied backgrounds in terms of family, geography, areas of interest. So we'll all be talking about this kind of dual life.
I have a question about that. So is it that amazing for scientists to also be poets? Because is it something like a scientific-minded person wouldn't be doing necessarily? Is it a huge juxtaposition? I mean,
I think it's amazing that anyone persists in working in the arts in the United States in this age. That aside, my answer is always that I do both from the same brain, the same set of sensibilities, and different specific interests will take me in one area or the other, and certainly we really segregate the opportunities in terms, it's application, what are the areas that you apply your skills and are compensated for them. And I was fascinated by the space program and space science and physics. But I found the segregation to be really an application not in my own work and study. And that led to a lot of inner conflict for a long time until I decided to explicitly and openly work in both areas.
Yeah, I think, this is really what our panel deals with, that there are many approaches to both activities which are shared. And, when you love both and you discover what those commonalities are, then you engage with that in that way. But you also come up against internal tensions around that. Sometimes those tensions are kind of creative. Sometimes they're a real struggle, and maybe that's why they are creative. But I think, the question is how odd is this? I think there are quite a few. There are maybe more than people are aware of, just like there are mathematicians, musicians, and there are people doing all kinds of different creative activities that overlap in different spheres.
I also think that some of the confluence in areas of study or work really come out of personal predispositions, our own aesthetics and the way our minds work and what intrigues us. So I think, for instance, for me it was poetry and physics, which are both, these really condensed forms of expression and ways of studying the intangible and putting it into a framework that we can work with and explore our universe with. So they have lots of areas of similarity to me. People often say that mathematics and music are very aligned, and you'll find a lot of people working in both. So there's a lot of shared territory between them. We're not really taught that they share that. We're certainly not taught that in school. We're not taught that out in the working world. But I hope that will be changing. There was a time when they were less separated. You have to go way back to the Renaissance, but there was a time when they were not so separated.
Right.
Yeah.
Leonardo, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, and that is coming at this from both of you, from being a woman, and both of you being in science.
But very dude-centric sciences.
Right, absolutely. Right. So, what would you say that? What age, or because I know both of you probably at a very young age were really studying your science, and did your poetry blossom at a certain time, like after you had finished all your studies, or was it something that always was there lingering in the background, do you think?
Well, Lisa and I were just talking about this the other day, and she was kind of saying, you know, it's like this question of, you know, who was more significant in your life, your father or your mother, or the equivalent of caregivers? You know, it's kind of like, for both, I think for both of us, and but certainly I know for myself, that these things grow up in you together, okay? And so, I'm not sure if that answers your question entirely, but there was this, it was interesting for me to hear what Lisa said about being, you know, the eldest son, and, you know, to being girls and having fathers who were in science, I think that was an influential thing for both of us. And so, but I do know that, you know, for example, my own father was interested in writing, and he never pursued it much. So, you know, there are these threads that enter your life from all different kind of places.
Yeah, for me, I think, you know, I was working very hard in art from really early on as a child. You know, I started drafting when I was 6, and I did a lot of drawing and a little bit of painting and dance and music, and I was helping build airplanes. So, you know, my dad wanted me to be able to work the machines in our home shop and read a blueprint and things. So, and know what a square root was early. That said, I wasn't like this brilliant early scientist or anything. So it really was a matter of having this love of space, and that was, you know, being a kid in the mid-60s will do that to you. And feeling like it was a possibility for me. I didn't feel so much the gender restrictions. I did, or if I did, I think I did, but it felt more like the pioneering challenge. You know, I think aviation I felt it a little more than I did in science. But I started writing early on.
I wanted to say I'm a bit older than Lisa. I definitely felt the gender restrictions and the gender challenges associated with being a woman in science. And I have written a bit about that. I had the love of it, you know, in my life as something, you know, I really cared about a lot. But yeah, the social aspect of it was, you know, something I had to come to terms with.
I felt them strongly. It wasn't until I entered later in school in the workforce. I didn't feel them so much in my family of origin, except when I made cheerleading, and my dad was like, yeah, but we're not spending money on those uniforms kind of thing. But in the workplace, certainly, like, there's no women's bathroom in this building. And me not wanting to confront someone with an actual conflict on a project if their office was full of nude posters. You know, that was the era. And it wasn't as long ago as people think.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there were women engineers, there weren't enough of them, and that was also industry specific. There were more in some industries than others.
And not over.
It's not over, yeah, it's not over.
But that's, you know, disappeared from our world at this stage. Yeah.
And what is the earliest that you can recall that you started actually writing poems?
2nd grade, but then I didn't really start focusing on poetry until high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I was a late bloomer. I was probably in 6th grade. And then, but high school is a time where that starts to really develop.
Yeah, the
I found
A's,
one, I think, in the
Yeah.
literary magazine from the high school that you went to.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't sure if it was around
Yeah.
then.
I mean, I think it's a great thing for schools to teach, to expose people to give them an opportunity to do. I think it's a really great thing in schools, and I think too many people have been turned off both poetry and science by bad experiences in that regard. So
they're both hard sells.
Too bad.
Speaking of selling, maybe this is a little far afield, but that's how my mind works sometimes. Have you ever considered using graphic artists along with your poetry, or even to the point of having animation for some of the very great visual effects, I would say, that I feel when I listen to your
Yeah.
poetry, and I've listened to
So
it.
I have a question then. So did you have visuals going in your mind?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
If we had provided some, would you have had those?
Well, what I've had,
You wouldn't.
I don't know, it might extend
I mean, I
poetry
just,
further.
I think it's fine to have maybe some
Yeah.
social media posts where you have short videos
Right.
with the poems,
Mhm.
or to have a book perhaps with a pairing
Yeah.
of work, or work in response back and forth, poems written about the painting, paintings
Mhm.
done in response to the poems. But I rarely want to predispose a listener or reader
Mhm.
and prematurely limit what associations and things they will bring to it.
I've actually seen a lecture that Lisa did where she very effectively used simple graphics,
Mhm.
and it really added.
It was a whiteboard and one
And-
marker.
Oh, no. It was more than- But it was at the Stanford Linear Accelerator, talking to the scientists there. But I've also seen it done, animations used very effectively by poets. It's not something I would want to do all the time myself, but I did work on I did create an artist book with some of my poetry, and working with the graphic artists. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of fun and very rewarding to engage with other artists in your work, particularly when often that work is very solitary. And the next thing I'd like to do is actually an art song project, so I'm going to talk to some people about that.
I think we're probably
yeah.
there on time, so thank you all once again.
Thank you.
I would highly recommend Adrienne's book right over there.
Lisa's.
Thank you.
They're over there.